The rain had just started falling in light drizzles that afternoon in Ilupeju, when a doggo lit the burner in the kitchen to boil water for her husband's bath. The clink of the kettle on the gas echoed faintly through the house. The mansion was silent, too silent for a place that once held laughter, love, and the smell of Sunday stew. Her wrapper was tightly secured around her waist. Her hair was in net because she hadn't planned to go anywhere, and her hands were stained from peeling yam. She looked nothing like the woman who once wore matching ankara to a wherry with her husband for family events. These days, she hardly even heard "thank you." So when she heard the gate clang, followed by loud stilettos and the unmistakable purr of a Range Rover engine, she wiped her hands on the kitchen towel and hurried out to open the door, thinking it was an unexpected guest or perhaps her husband returning with groceries. Before she could even say good afternoon, the young light-skinned lady stormed in with expensive perfume trailing behind her like arrogance in physical form. She looked a doggo up and down with sheer disgust. "Where is the madam of the house?" the lady barked, pointing her acrylic nails toward the living room. A doggo blinked in confusion. "Sorry?" she asked, not out of rudeness but disbelief. The woman stepped closer, and before a doggo could process what was happening, slap. The sound echoed like a gunshot in that quiet compound. "Don't sorry me. You think you can keep a man looking like this? See how you've reduced yourself. A whole chief's wife looking like kitchen help." The slap stung, not just on her face, but in her soul. The stranger in her home had insulted her existence, mistook her for a maid, and even dared to lay hands on her, inside her own house. What broke a doggo wasn't just the pain of the slap, but the moment her husband, Chief Damien, stepped in, saw what happened, and simply said, "Amarachi, calm down. It's not that serious." A doggo stood there, one hand on her cheek, her eyes welling up not from the slap, but from what she now knew for sure. She was no longer his wife. She was now the housemaid. Amarachi, the mistress, had walked into her home with the confidence of ownership. Her husband didn't defend her, didn't ask what happened, didn't even flinch when his mistress slapped the woman who cooked his meals, ironed his clothes, nursed him through malaria, and stood by him when the FCC froze his accounts. Amarachi removed her shoes arrogantly, dusted her Versace purse like she had just conquered something, and sat on the couch. A doggo turned around quietly and walked back into the kitchen, trembling, her soul cracked. That night, she didn't eat. She didn't sleep. She didn't even cry. She simply stared at the ceiling, her mind blank, heart swollen, wondering when her home stopped being hers. The morning came without warning. The sun rose like it always did, golden and loud, but inside a doggo's chest it was still midnight. She stood in front of the mirror in their master bedroom, a room she used to decorate with scented candles and lace beddings from Yaba Market, now littered with Amarachi's wigs and makeup kits. The woman had spent the night. In her home. On her bed. With her husband. A doggo quietly picked up her wrapper from the floor, folded it slowly, and wore a plain t-shirt over her nightgown. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. Instead, she walked downstairs to prepare breakfast like she always did, her mind numb, like a radio with the volume turned down low. Downstairs, Amarachi waltzed into the kitchen like a peacock in heat. "Oya, maid, bring me tea." "Not Lipton," I said, "green tea." "And warm the croissants, not microwave, use the oven," she said, her voice sharp, echoing entitlement. A doggo stood with her back turned, hands on the kettle, but her shoulders tensed. Her fingers trembled slightly. Not from fear, oh no, not anymore. It was something else now. Something darker. Amarachi strutted around, sipping orange juice she hadn't paid for, in a house she hadn't contributed a kobo to. "See how your hair is rough. And your feet, ha! If I were a man, I too wouldn't stay with a woman like you. Chief deserves better," she spat out, her lip curled with mockery. A doggo turned slowly, finally meeting her eyes. "Are you done?" she asked, her voice low, controlled. Amarachi scoffed. "Don't talk to me like that, you dirty maid. I will slap you again, I swear." In fact, she took a step forward, raising her hand like she had the night before, but this time, a doggo didn't flinch. She held her gaze, steel meeting foolishness. Amarachi paused mid-swing, unsettled by the sudden coldness in the woman's stare. Something shifted. "Go and sit down," a doggo said softly. "Your tea is ready." It wasn't submission. It was strategy. It was the calm before a very calculated storm. Later that afternoon, Chief Damien returned from his law firm in Victoria Island, and barely acknowledged a doggo as she passed him the newspaper. "You see, Amarachi is moving in," he muttered, as if reading the stock market. "We can all live peacefully if you stop being dramatic. She's young. She's vibrant. You've changed. That sentence sealed everything. Not the betrayal. Not the slap. Not even the insult. But you've changed, as though she hadn't had to change for him, for the kids, for the marriage. He didn't know he had broken something that would never be rebuilt again. He didn't know that the quietness in her now was not defeat. It was detachment. And detachment, in the hands of a woman who once loved you fully, is more dangerous than anger. By nightfall, the house was quiet again, but this time Amarachi's laughter didn't ring as loudly. Something about a doggo's silence haunted her. The way she stared. The way she cooked dinner and didn't serve it. The way she never raised her voice, yet the air felt heavier when she walked by. It was as if Amarachi, in all her expensive perfumes and beauty, had slapped something divine, and something divine had turned and taken note. But she couldn't know that. Not yet. She didn't know that a doggo was about to make silence the loudest scream they had ever heard. The following Sunday, the house was full of music from Amarachi's speaker, playing loudly in the living room as she danced in shorts too tight and a blouse too sheer for a woman inside another woman's home. She shook her waist shamelessly, filming herself for Instagram while a doggo swept the corridor in silence. When Amarachi noticed her, she turned the camera and shouted, "See this one? Always sweeping like a condemned soul. Madame Broom. Smile for the camera and..." She laughed like a devil in heat, but what broke a doggo wasn't the insult, it was the chuckle that followed. Damien had been standing at the stairs. He chuckled. He didn't say, "That's my wife." He didn't say, "Don't film her." He laughed. And in that moment, something inside a doggo finally shattered beyond repair. This was no longer her husband. This was a stranger wearing the face of the man who once swore before God and man to protect her. The same man who now watched her be humiliated in front of a smartphone lens and called it light-hearted fun. Amarachi had taken over. She now answered the gate, took calls from the bank, even scolded the houseboy. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that a doggo was no fool. She had kept receipts, property documents, voice notes, evidence. She had sat through meetings, co-signed agreements, and paid for the very land this house stood on, while Chief was facing fraud allegations years back. But she said nothing. Not yet. 2 weeks later, Chief hosted a small gathering. Amarachi invited her friends, slay queens who wore wigs like crowns and drank wine like it was water. They posed by the pool, clicking selfies in front of furniture a doggo had carefully picked out of love. No one acknowledged her. Not even the steward, who used to call her madam. The only person who greeted her that evening was Musa, the gateman, and he whispered, "Auntie God Day." And he was right. God was watching. So was karma. That evening, after everyone left and Chief was tipsy in the parlor with Amarachi in his lap, a doggo walked in with her small brown box. "I'll be leaving for now," she said. No tears. No drama. Just peace. Chief looked up lazily. "Leaving? To where?" Amarachi giggled. "Let her go na. She don't tire." A doggo smiled faintly and walked away, but as she stepped out, she turned and said, "Take care of the house, Amarachi. You'll need more than wigs and waist beads to keep it standing." Amarachi laughed, but her laughter was hollow. Something about a doggo's voice that day felt like prophecy. And just like that, the woman she thought was a maid vanished. Not to her mother's house. Not to a friend's place. But somewhere quiet, where she started her next plan. Amarachi moved in officially the next week. She threw out a doggo's clothes and turned the bedroom into a makeup studio. She danced in the kitchen, burnt stew twice, and screamed at the houseboy for not slicing onions the Lagos way. Chief tolerated it, at first. Then slowly, his tone began to change. The noise became irritating. The Instagram lives too frequent. The fake accent grating. She was fun in doses, but unbearable in permanence. By the second month, the cracks began to show. Amarachi didn't cook. She didn't clean. She didn't know what utility bills were or how to balance a house budget. And Chief? He started coming home late again. One night, as rain battered the windows and thunder rolled like ancestral drums, Amarachi sat alone in the bedroom, scrolling through pictures of Chief with a doggo from 2 years ago. Their wedding anniversary in Enugu. The smiles. The joy. Even she, Amarachi, couldn't deny it, they looked happy. Real happy. She stared at a video where a doggo danced awkwardly, while Chief clapped and laughed. That laugh, it was different. Not the tired, dry chuckles he gave her now. No, it was warm. Full. Alive. For the first time, Amarachi felt something strange. It wasn't regret, not yet, but discomfort. She had won the house, but she was beginning to realize she hadn't won the man. Chief Damien paced the compound one Thursday morning, a court letter clutched in his hand like a burning coal. He stormed back into the house, face flushed. "A doggo served me?" "She served me a petition," he growled. Amarachi, lounging in silk shorts on the couch, lazily sipped orange juice and blinked. "Served you how?" she asked, chewing gum as if this was Nollywood and she had the lead role. Damien flung the paper across the room. "Land ownership. Business registration. Joint accounts. She's laying claim to everything. And she's got documents." For the first time since she stepped into that house, Amarachi sat up. "Wait! I thought you said the house was fully yours." Damien ran his hands down his face. "It was. But, during that FCC drama, a doggo bailed me out. Legally, she has co-ownership." His voice cracked under the weight of the truth he had ignored for too long. Amarachi began to tremble slightly. "So she can take this house?" she asked, her voice low. Damien didn't answer. Silence swallowed the room. He sat down, the man who once laughed as another woman was slapped now looking like the floor had vanished beneath him. Amarachi stood slowly, her mind spinning. Wait, so everything I posted on Instagram, every soft life I showed, this house isn't even really mine? They'll drag me online like a stray dog, she cried. But Damien wasn't listening. His mind was drifting to the years of loyalty, of partnership, of quiet strength a doggo gave him, and how he threw it away for perfume and thighs. Meanwhile, in a quiet estate in Ilupeju, a doggo sipped tea and watched her lawyer review the final batch of documents. She didn't need noise. She had evidence. And soon, her silence would scream. It was on a dusty Tuesday morning when a doggo walked into the mediation room, wearing a simple black gown, minimal makeup, and dignity wrapped around her like armor. She greeted everyone politely, including her soon-to-be ex-husband, who looked like a shadow of the proud man he once was. Amarachi sat beside him, trying to wear confidence like a handbag, but it was clear the weight of reality was beginning to crush her spirit. The mediator explained their options: a peaceful separation or a legal war. Chief cleared his throat, voice dry. "We can settle. I don't want to fight her." Amarachi snapped her head toward him. "What do you mean settle? Damien, what happened to fighting for what's yours?" But he didn't respond. His eyes were locked on a doggo, on the strength in her silence, the power in her gaze. A doggo stood up, handed a folder to the mediator, and said, "I don't want drama. Just what is mine." The room went quiet. Inside the folder were title deeds, business investment slips, and a list of assets she'd built side by side with him. Not stolen. Not begged for. Earned. Amarachi looked through the documents and realized, too late, that she had walked into a palace thinking it was an Airbnb. Everything she claimed, everything she mocked a doggo for not having, a doggo owned it. Or at least half. By law. By blood. By history. As they walked out of the building, reporters stood outside, not for them, but for another case, but Amarachi flinched anyway, hiding her face. A doggo didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had walked in with nothing but her name, and walked out with her dignity. And that, to a woman who was once slapped in her own house, was the beginning of her revenge. A doggo didn't post anything online. She didn't grant interviews or make noise about the settlement she secured. Instead, she returned to her new apartment in Surulere, painted the walls cream, bought new bed sheets, and resumed her tailoring hustle with a quiet strength that disturbed the people who once mocked her. Her neighbor, Mama Titi, would sometimes peep through the curtain and whisper to others, "That's the woman whose husband left her for a small girl." But she carried herself like queen. And that was exactly what a doggo had become, a queen in exile who never lost her throne. Meanwhile, Chief Damien's home had become a battleground. Amarachi no longer smiled as much. She barely posted. Her slay queen friends stopped coming around. Something had shifted. Chief Damien came home one evening to find Amarachi arguing with the generator man about fuel costs. "Can you believe he said there's no diesel?" "He's lying," she yelled. Chief rubbed his forehead, tired. "I transferred housekeeping money last week." "What did you do with it?" Amarachi scoffed. "Do I look like your financial planner? I'm your babe, not your maid." And just like that, the curtain of illusion began to fall. She wasn't a doggo. She couldn't manage the home. She didn't know the account numbers, or how to refill the gas. She only knew how to pose, spend, and complain. That night, Chief opened his drawer and saw the old photo of a doggo from their university days. The one where she was smiling, holding their first baby in one arm and an accounting textbook in the other. His eyes burned, but no tears fell. He had traded gold for glitter, and the shine was wearing off. Amarachi had invited her cousin over that Sunday to show off. "This house? Mine," she boasted, tossing her Brazilian wig behind her shoulder. "Chief loves me die. That woman? She'd be like housegirl. Always quiet like wet towel." But just as she poured Zobo into plastic cups and snapped Instagram stories by the fountain, a black Prado Jeep drove through the gates. 2 men in suits stepped out. "Good afternoon, Ma," one said politely to Amarachi. "We're from Adago and Partners. This property is under legal reassessment and scheduled for transfer." Amarachi blinked. "Transfer to where?" she laughed. "You're confused. This is my house." But when the second man brought out the file, stamped with court orders, dates, signatures, and copies of the settlement agreement, her laughter disappeared. "You're hereby advised to vacate within 14 working days," the man concluded. Amarachi stood frozen, hands trembling, lips parting but no words coming out. She waited for Chief to react, but he stood silently by the gate, hands in his pockets. He had no strength left to fight what he knew was right. That night, Amarachi didn't eat. She didn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, recalling every time she called Adago maid, every slap, every insult, every hair flip done in mockery. Now the walls she posed beside for pictures were no longer hers. The kitchen she mocked Adago in would soon welcome her back. The bedroom she once defiled now echoed with the silence of karma. And Amarachi, for the first time, began to understand that you don't inherit a throne by slapping its queen. You inherit a curse. It was on a Wednesday afternoon, hot, humid, and heavy with Lagos tension, when Adago returned to the house. Not with police, not with noise, but with calmness that carried weight. She stepped out of the car wearing a simple iro and buba, no makeup, no show, just grace. The security man, Musa, rushed to open the gate, grinning wide like he had just seen the second coming. "Welcome back, madam," he whispered, eyes gleaming with relief. She nodded, stepped in, and looked around. The flowers she had planted had withered. The paint had faded. But the house, her house, stood waiting. Inside, Amarachi had just finished straightening her wig when she heard the door open. "Who's that?" "Musa, you know day knock again," she shouted. Then she turned and saw Adago standing in the living room, flanked by 2 lawyers. Amarachi froze. For a second, she didn't recognize the woman, so regal, so composed, so undisturbed. Then her voice cracked. What are you doing here?" she asked, already backing away. "Didn't you get the letter?" Adago replied. "This house isn't yours, and your time here is up." Amarachi laughed nervously. "You're bluffing. Chief won't let you." "Abi Damien," she called, but there was no response. Chief was nowhere in sight. Adago took a step closer and handed her the court-stamped letter again. Amarachi's hand trembled as she took it, her knees weakening. "You can take your time, but in 72 hours, I'll be moving back in." "With or without your consent," Adago said, then turned and walked back out, her heels echoing like thunder on the tiles. Amarachi stood there, a shadow of the woman who once slapped a queen thinking she was a maid. Her reign was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The day Adago moved back into her house, there were no drums. No family welcome. No dancing. Just quiet. But it was the kind of quiet that screamed victory. She walked through the corridors slowly, opening windows, letting sunlight in like a blessing. She rearranged the furniture, dusted picture frames, and laid her wrapper across the same bed she had been pushed out of. But this time it felt different. Not because it was hers again, but because she no longer needed to prove anything. Amarachi had packed her bags reluctantly. Chief didn't offer help. In fact, he didn't even escort her to the car. All her drama, her beauty, her curves and clapbacks meant nothing now. What she didn't know when she slapped Adago was that some women don't fight back with noise. They fight with evidence, patience, and strategy. As Amarachi stood at the gate, clutching her boxes and staring at the home she once paraded in, she whispered, "Tell her I'm sorry." Chief didn't respond. He stood beside her like a man who had just watched his own crown slide from his fingers into the mud. Adago didn't come out to gloat. She didn't throw words. She simply watched through the curtain, then turned back into her room and continued arranging her books. That night, she wrote in her journal, "He didn't deserve me. She didn't destroy me. I gave them silence, and silence gave me back everything they tried to steal." And just before she slept, she heard the faint knock on the gate again. Amarachi, back, crying, saying she had nowhere to go. Life, as they say, has a way of folding in on the foolish. It had rained all night, the kind of storm that made even generators go silent. By morning, the compound was wet, and the plants sparkled with dew. A doggo sat on the veranda sipping pap slowly, her wrapper loosely tied, feet resting on the stool she once shared with Damien during better years. The air was still when Musa came to the back door. "Madam, he get person way day outside gate," he mumbled. She didn't flinch. "Who?" she asked, though she already knew. Musa scratched his head. "Na Amarachi. She day kneel. Say make you just give her 5 minutes talk." A doggo placed her bowl down. The silence between that moment and her next breath was loaded with so many versions of herself. The crying wife, the slapped woman, the insulted queen, the woman who walked away quietly. Now she stood up. She walked to the gate slowly, deliberately. And there, soaked by the drizzle, in a once white crop top and leggings stained with dust, was Amarachi, on both knees. Her lashes were falling off. Her wig was crooked. Her voice trembled. "Ani madam, please," she stammered, unable to look up. "I didn't know. I thought you were just the maid. I didn't mean to. Please help me. I have nowhere to go." A doggo looked at her for a long time. Not with hatred. Not even with anger. But with something far more painful, pity. "You slapped me in my house, Amarachi," she said quietly. "Called me dirty. Mocked my marriage. Laughed when I left. And now you kneel where I once cried." Amarachi's tears mixed with the rain. "Please forgive me. I was foolish. I was proud. I didn't know you were the owner. I didn't know who I was messing with." A doggo stood silent. Even now, she wouldn't gloat. She just turned and said, "Go and apologize to yourself. That's who you hurt the most." Amarachi's voice broke completely as she grabbed a doggo's ankle, desperate now. "Madam, please forgive me. I have nowhere else to go. He said I should leave. He blocked my number. I've not eaten in 2 days. Nobody wants to help me because I insulted you." Her voice was hoarse, cracking under the weight of her own karma. "Please, just let me stay in the boys' quarters. I will clean, I will cook, anything." It was the same woman who once called a doggo dirty maid, now begging to be the maid. Neighbors across the street watched through their curtains, shaking their heads. Some recorded quietly. Others whispered prayers. A doggo bent slightly, looked her in the eye and said, "This isn't about the house anymore. Or the slap. Or the man. This is about who you became when you thought no one could stop you." She turned back inside, and didn't say another word. Amarachi knelt there for hours until the rain stopped, and the sun came out. Her makeup was ruined. Her pride was gone. But a doggo never came back out. Not because she was being cruel, but because she knew that forgiveness, when forced, is not healing. That night, as a doggo laid her head to sleep, she whispered, "Lord, I don't hate her. But I needed her to see herself. To remember this day, not to shame her, but to save her from becoming worse." And somewhere outside, in the dark corner of the fence, Amarachi cried herself to sleep, finally realizing that the woman she once slapped was not a maid, but a storm she should never have touched. The next morning came slow and heavy. Birds chirped like nothing had happened, but a doggo's heart was steadier than ever. She walked into the kitchen, humming quietly as she prepared yam porridge, and served herself like a queen reclaiming her rhythm. Then came the second knock, this time softer, slower, not desperate, but ashamed. She opened the door and found Chief Damien standing there, older in the face, eyes red, suit wrinkled, holding nothing but a faded photo of their wedding day. "A doggo! I've made terrible mistakes," he began. She didn't speak. She watched him like she had once watched Amarachi. "I let my pride, my stupidity, and a foolish woman destroy what we built. I've lost the company, I've lost the house, I've lost my peace. But I don't want to lose you." His voice cracked like a broken roof under rainfall. "Please forgive me." But a doggo wasn't the same woman who once begged him to come home early. She wasn't the one who once fasted for his promotion or stitched his igbada for court appearances. She had buried that version of herself quietly. She looked at the man who had watched her be slapped, insulted, mocked, and said nothing. "You didn't just lose me, Damien," she said softly. "You gave me away. And now that I'm whole again, you want to return?" He took a step closer, eyes moist. "I still love you." She shook her head. "No, you love your comfort. You miss your balance. I was never your plan B, Damien. I was your entire alphabet, but you tossed me for a vowel with hips." He dropped to his knees, but it was too late. Tears in his eyes didn't move her. They weren't enough anymore. 3 weeks later, the compound bloomed again. Musa trimmed the hedges. The flowers a doggo once planted began to flourish. The air smelled of soup, hope, and healing. Adago had opened a home tailoring business inside the boys' quarters and hired 2 girls from the community. But what no one expected, what even life itself hadn't scripted, was Amarachi's return, not as a queen, not as a mistress, but as a quiet shadow. She stood at the gate again, this time with a small bag, humility in her voice, and genuine remorse in her soul. "I don't want anything, Auntie," she whispered. I want to work. Let me serve the woman I once disrespected." Adago thought for a long time. The world would say no. The world would mock. But Adago knew something deeper. True power wasn't in punishment. It was in placing boundaries and still choosing peace. She gave Amarachi the storeroom. Gave her uniforms. No special favors. No hatred. Just work. And every morning, Amarachi scrubbed the floors she once walked on with pride. She cleaned the kitchen she once insulted. She called Adago Ma. And Adago? She moved through her house like royalty. Her silence had done what screaming could never achieve. Her scars became her strength. And the house that once echoed with slaps now breathed only peace. Because the woman who was once mistaken for a maid had returned as the rightful queen. And even those who once mocked her now bowed with respect. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and put on post notifications.